They say power changes people, but nobody ever talks about what happens when power chooses you. She walked into that mansion as an outsider. No title, no protection, no idea. She just stepped into a war that had already claimed blood. Behind these walls, loyalty is currency, silence is survival, and love is the most dangerous weapon of all. One man rules this empire with fear and precision. Another waits in the shadows, hungry for the throne. And between them stands a woman who was never meant to survive, but refuses to kneel. If you're drawn to stories where power shifts, secrets kill, and survival depends on the next move, subscribe now, because you won't want to miss what happens next. This is not a love story. This is not a crime story. This is a game of betrayal, desire, and control, where every choice costs something, and walking away is never an option. Watch closely, don't blink, and stay with us till the very end. Because once the game begins, there is no escape. Please subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the concluding part of this movie. Comment your thoughts and give us a thumbs up. The iron gates of the mansion slid open without a sound, revealing a long, curved driveway bathed in low amber lights. The house itself rose at the end like a living thing. Dark stone, sharp angles, glass walls that reflected Seoul's distant glow. It was not designed to welcome. It was designed to warn. Amara Cole stepped out of the black sedan with measured calm, though her pulse betrayed her. The air was cold, sharp against her skin, carrying the faint scent of pine and rain. She adjusted her coat, a simple wool piece she had bought secondhand, suddenly aware of how small and ordinary she looked against the scale of the estate. She had been told it was a private gathering, a business-adjacent dinner. No names had been explained clearly. Just that attendance was mandatory if she wanted the opportunity promised to her, a chance at work that paid well enough to erase the suffocating pressure that had been closing around her life for months. As she moved toward the entrance, the doors opened before she could knock. Madame Yoon stood there, hands folded neatly in front of her tailored gray dress. Her hair was pulled back into a severe bun, her face smooth and unreadable, eyes sharp as polished stone. "You are late," Madame Yoon said calmly. Amara glanced at her watch. "I arrived at the time I was given." Madame Yoon studied her for a long moment, as if measuring the truth of her words against something only she could see. Then she stepped aside. "Follow me. Speak only when spoken to." The door closed behind them with a quiet finality that sent a chill through Amara's spine. Inside, the mansion was dim, illuminated by indirect lighting that softened nothing, only deepened the shadows. Marble floors reflected muted gold tones. The air felt heavy, as if sound itself had been disciplined to behave. Voices were low, footsteps nearly silent. Amara walked a half-step behind Madame Yoon, her eyes taking in details instinctively. Expensive, yes, but not ostentatious. Everything here was deliberate, controlled. Even the art on the walls, abstract pieces heavy with black and crimson, felt less like decoration and more like declaration. They entered a vast sitting room where several men stood in small clusters, dressed in dark suits, murmuring quietly. Power hummed through the space, unspoken but unmistakable. Amara felt it before she saw him. At the far end of the room, partially obscured by a structural column, a man stood apart from the others. He was facing the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped loosely behind his back, posture relaxed but unmistakably commanding. The city lights reflected faintly off the glass, outlining his silhouette in silver and shadow. Jaehyun Park. She did not know his name yet, but her instincts recognized him instantly. The room subtly oriented around him. Conversations angled in his direction. Men glanced toward him before speaking, as if checking an invisible compass. He did not turn. Yet Amara knew with a certainty that made her breath catch, that he was aware of her presence. Madame Yoon stopped near the edge of the room. "You will wait here." Amara nodded, folding her hands together to keep them steady. Her gaze drifted despite herself. Jaehyun finally turned slightly, just enough for her to see his profile. Sharp jaw, dark hair swept back with careless precision. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, when they lifted, were not. They locked onto her. The effect was immediate and physical. It felt as though the room had narrowed, as though the space between them had been pulled tight like a wire. His gaze did not wander, did not soften. It assessed. She forced herself not to look away. Something flickered in his eyes. Not warmth. Interest. Before anything more could pass between them, a man near the center of the room laughed too loudly. The sound grated against the silence like a crack in glass. "I'm just saying," the man said, his tone careless, bordering on arrogant. "Your shipment schedule is optimistic. The docks aren't as clean as you think." Jaehyun did not move. He did not speak. He simply lifted his hand, 2 fingers, barely raised. The room shifted. Min Jae Kim stepped forward from the shadows near the wall. Tall, lean, his presence was sudden and absolute. He approached the laughing man without haste. "I think," Min Jae said quietly, "you misunderstand whose optimism matters." The man's smile faltered. "I didn't mean." Jaehyun finally spoke, his voice calm, low, and devastatingly controlled. "Optimism," he said, "is for men who can afford mistakes." He did not raise his voice. He did not look angry. He merely turned his head enough for his full gaze to land on the man. The silence stretched. The man swallowed. "Of course. My apologies." Jaehyun inclined his head once. The matter was over. Amara's breath released slowly, only then realizing she had been holding it. That was when she understood. Violence did not need to announce itself here. Power lived in restraint. Min Jae returned to his place without another word. The man who had laughed avoided Jaehyun's direction entirely from then on. Madame Yoon's eyes flicked briefly toward Amara, noting her reaction. Something like approval, or warning, passed through her gaze. Time moved strangely after that. Drinks were served. Conversations resumed in low tones. Amara remained where she was, observing, absorbing. Years of navigating unfamiliar spaces, of learning to read rooms quickly for survival, kicked in. She caught fragments of conversation. Shipping routes. Corporate acquisitions. Numbers large enough to feel abstract. This was not a dinner party. It was a convergence of leverage. Jaehyun did not approach her. He watched. Occasionally, his gaze returned to her, brief but piercing. Each time, it felt like a test. She met his eyes once more, then deliberately looked away, not in submission, but in composure. She refused to fidget, refused to shrink. That, more than anything, seemed to capture his attention. As the evening progressed, Madame Yoon gestured subtly, and Amara followed her out of the sitting room into a quieter corridor. The sudden absence of voices made the space feel cavernous. "This way," Madame Yoon said. They moved deeper into the mansion. The corridors grew narrower, more private. Security cameras were discreet, but plentiful. Amara's instincts prickled. "I was told this was a dinner," Amara said carefully. Madame Yoon did not slow. "It is." They stopped outside a side room. Madame Yoon opened the door, revealing a smaller lounge with a long table, documents laid out neatly. 2 men stood inside, neither familiar to Amara. They paused their conversation when she entered. Madame Yoon turned to her. "You will wait here. Do not touch anything." Before Amara could respond, Madame Yoon closed the door and left. The click of the lock echoed too loudly. Amara exhaled slowly. The men inside returned to their murmured conversation, speaking in Korean. She caught enough to understand the tone, if not every word. This was business. Quiet. Precise. She took a seat near the wall, her posture relaxed but alert. Her mind drifted, unbidden, to how she had ended up here. To the apartment she had packed up last week. To the emails unanswered. To the growing weight of responsibility she carried alone. This was supposed to be a step forward. A sound outside the door broke her thoughts. Footsteps. A different cadence. The door opened again, and Jaehyun entered. The room changed instantly. The 2 men straightened. One of them spoke quickly, deferentially. Jaehyun waved him silent without looking at him. His attention went directly to Amara. "Leave us," he said to the men. They did not hesitate. Within seconds, Amara was alone with him. The door closed. Jaehyun studied her openly now. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. Not loud, not aggressive, but dense, as if gravity itself bent subtly toward him. "You are not what I expected," he said. Amara lifted her chin. "You didn't tell me what you expected." A pause. Then, a faint curve at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. An acknowledgement. "Most people in this room try to disappear," he said. "You do not." "I learned early that disappearing doesn't keep you safe," she replied. "It just makes you forgettable." Something shifted in his eyes. Interest sharpened. "Do you know where you are?" he asked. "Yes." Do you know who I am? Not officially. He took a step closer. And yet you're still standing. I was invited. He studied her for another moment, then turned slightly, picking up a document from the table. You shouldn't be here, he said casually. This room is restricted. Amara's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice steady. Then someone made a mistake. Perhaps, he said. Or perhaps you walked into something you weren't meant to see. Her gaze flicked involuntarily to the papers in his hand. He noticed. You understand numbers, he said. I understand patterns. He considered that. Then, abruptly, he placed the document back on the table, face up. Amara's breath caught. She recognized enough. Accounts. Transfers. Offshore routing. Not illegal on the surface, but the structure, the intent, it was unmistakable. You're not frightened, Jaehyun observed. I am, she said honestly. But fear doesn't help me think. Good, he said softly. Because now you have a problem. He moved closer, stopping just short of her personal space. You saw this, yes. Most people who see this don't leave this room. Her pulse thundered, but she did not step back. Are you going to kill me? The question hung between them. Jaehyun's gaze searched her face, as if looking for something beneath the words. Finally, he shook his head. No. Relief surged, quickly followed by confusion. Why? She asked. Because, he said, you didn't look away. He stepped back, creating space again. You have composure. Intelligence. And you didn't pretend ignorance when you knew better. He turned toward the door. That makes you interesting. He paused, his hand on the handle. But interesting things are also dangerous. He glanced over his shoulder, his eyes locking onto hers once more. You will stay, he said. For now. Then he left. The door closed behind him, leaving Amara alone with the echo of his words, and the chilling realization that her life had just tilted irrevocably into a world she did not yet understand. Outside the room, unseen by her, Min-jae watched Jaehyun carefully. You're keeping her, Min-jae said quietly. Jaehyun did not deny it. Keep an eye on her, he replied. She may change everything. And somewhere in the shadows of the mansion, Tae-suk Park watched from a distance, his gaze fixed on the woman who had just captured his brother's attention, his smile sharp with something dark and hungry, already calculating how to turn her presence into a weapon. The game had begun. The night settled heavily over the mansion, pressing against its walls like a held breath. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted since Amara's quiet confinement became an unspoken rule. She was no longer escorted everywhere, yet she was never alone. The house watched her the way its master did, silently, attentively, with purpose. Amara learned the rhythms quickly. She learned when the guards changed shifts, when Madame Yoon made her rounds, when Min-jae lingered in corridors pretending to check his phone while actually checking on her. And she learned Jaehyun's habits most of all. He appeared without warning. Sometimes he stood across the room, pretending to read messages on his tablet while watching her reflection in polished surfaces. Other times he joined her at breakfast, silent but present, his attention drifting toward her no matter how carefully he disguised it. Their conversations began cautiously. You walk like you expect the floor to give way, Jaehyun remarked one evening as Amara crossed the study, shelves of leather-bound books towering around them. I grew up learning not to trust stability, she replied evenly. It tends to disappear. He glanced up at her, one eyebrow lifting slightly. Yet you stand your ground. Running never helped me, she said. It only makes you easier to chase. That earned a brief, humorless exhale from him. You speak like someone who has been hunted. I speak like someone who survived. Silence followed, thick but not hostile. It felt measured, like a chessboard between them, each word a move neither rushed to make. Min-jae watched these exchanges closely. At first, his distrust of Amara was palpable, his body angled subtly between her and Jaehyun whenever possible, his gaze sharp whenever she spoke too freely. But Amara did not flinch from him. One afternoon, as she studied a security screen in the hallway, Min-jae stopped beside her. You're not afraid of cameras, he said. I'm used to being watched, she answered. It teaches you when people lie. He studied her, then glanced at the feed she was observing. What do you see? Blind spots, she said simply, pointing to a corner the camera failed to cover. That one would get someone killed. His eyes narrowed, not in suspicion this time, but in reluctant respect. You notice things, he said. I have to, she replied. No one else ever noticed me. From that moment, Min-jae's posture toward her shifted. Still guarded, but no longer dismissive. Madame Yoon, however, remained an enigma. She summoned Amara late one night, her voice low and precise. They sat in a quiet sitting room lit only by a single lamp. "You are still alive because you are useful," Madame Yoon said calmly. "Do not mistake that for safety." Amara met her gaze. "I don't. This house eats the unprepared," Madame Yoon continued. "And the ambitious." "What about the loyal?" Amara asked. Madame Yoon's lips pressed into a thin line. "They die last." The warning lingered long after Madame Yoon left. The attack came without warning. It was past midnight when the first alarm sounded, not loud, but sharp, designed to alert those who knew how to listen. Lights dimmed automatically. Guards moved with sudden precision. Amara was in the east wing when the power flickered. She heard the first shot, silenced, distant, unmistakable. Her heart slammed against her ribs, but she didn't freeze. She moved. Voices echoed down the hall. A junior courier, barely more than a boy, stumbled out of a side room, panic written across his face. "They're inside," he whispered hoarsely. "Mask." The sound of footsteps cut him off. Amara grabbed his arm. "This way." She pulled him into a service corridor just as a masked figure rounded the corner, weapon raised. Amara shoved the boy forward and slammed a maintenance door shut behind them, jamming it with a fire extinguisher. "Stay quiet," she hissed. The assassin fired once, too late. The bullet struck metal, ringing loudly. Amara didn't wait. She scanned the corridor, spotted an emergency release panel, and yanked it open. Steam burst out, flooding the hallway beyond the door. "Run when I say," she told the boy. She counted silently, then kicked the extinguisher loose and shoved the door open. Steam and confusion exploded into the corridor. Now, they ran. By the time Min-jae intercepted them, the assassin was already neutralized by security. Jae-hyun arrived seconds later, his expression cold fury restrained by discipline. "What happened?" he demanded. Min-jae gestured to Amara. "She saved him." Jae-hyun's gaze snapped to her. For the first time since they met, he looked shaken, not frightened, but unsettled. "You disobeyed protocol," he said quietly. "Yes," Amara replied. "Because protocol would have gotten him killed." The boy nodded frantically. "She didn't hesitate, sir." Jae-hyun studied her, his eyes searching her face as if recalibrating everything he thought he knew. "Get her checked," he told Min-jae. "Then bring her to my office." Later, alone with Jae-hyun, the tension shifted. "You could have run," he said. "You didn't." "I don't abandon people," she answered. "Even when it's safer." "Safety is relative here," he said. "So is trust." Their eyes locked. Something unspoken settled between them. Fragile, dangerous, real. Meanwhile, Tae-suk smiled. He watched the aftermath from a private balcony, fingers tapping against his glass. His brother's attention had shifted exactly where he wanted it. Amara. Over the following days, Tae-suk moved quietly. A misdirected shipment here. A leaked schedule there. Small fractures, carefully placed. Amara, unaware of the full scope, felt the tension rise. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Eyes lingered too long. She adapted. She listened more. Spoke less. Learned who resented her presence and who feared it. She caught whispers of outsider and liability, but also asset and insurance. One evening, Jae-hyun found her in the library. "You're learning faster than I expected," he said. "I don't have the luxury of being slow." He poured 2 drinks, offering her one. She hesitated only a moment before accepting. "Why keep me here?" she asked. "Because you see what others don't," he replied. "And because you haven't lied to me." She studied him. Yet. His gaze sharpened. "Careful." "I am," she said softly. Every second. Their closeness was dangerous now. Charged. Unavoidable. Min-jae confronted her later that night. "You don't belong in his orbit," he said bluntly. "Neither do you," she replied. "I chose it," he said. "You didn't." "I'm still choosing," she said quietly. "He destroys everything he cares about," Min-jae warned. "Because enemies use it against him." Before she could respond, the trap closed. Documents surfaced the next morning. Evidence pointing to Amara as the source of leaked intel. Altered security logs. A forged transfer. Jae-hyun's expression was unreadable as he faced her. "Did you betray me?" he asked. Amara stared at the evidence, her mind racing. She looked up slowly. "No," she said. "But someone wants you to think I did." Silence swallowed the room. Somewhere in the mansion, Tae-suk watched, waiting for the fall. Amara felt the shift, the moment the game changed. She was no longer just surviving. She was playing. And for the first time, she held something dangerous in her hands. Leverage. The mansion no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a trap that had finally decided to close its jaws. The first explosion shattered a window on the west wing, sending glass raining into the marble corridor like lethal confetti. Alarms screamed to life, no longer subtle, no longer restrained. Red emergency lights bled across the walls, painting everything in warning and chaos. Amara was in the study when the shockwave hit. The floor trembled beneath her feet, books toppling from shelves. She grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself, heart slamming hard enough to hurt. This wasn't an external breach. This was inside. She knew it instantly. Footsteps thundered outside the door. Shouts. Gunfire, no longer silenced. Someone wanted blood tonight. The door flew open and Min Jae burst in, his expression already bloodied, jaw tight with urgency. We have to move. Now. What's happening? Amara asked, forcing her voice steady. Tae-suk, Min Jae said. He's done pretending. Another explosion echoed deeper in the mansion, followed by screams. Amara's stomach dropped. He planned this, she said. Min Jae nodded once. He's been planning it for years. They moved fast, cutting through service corridors and stairwells meant only for staff and security. The mansion's layout, once elegant, now felt like a maze designed to disorient prey. As they ran, Min Jae spoke in clipped bursts. He rerouted security. Half the guards are compromised. The rest are fighting blind. And Jaehyun? Amara asked. Min Jae didn't answer immediately. That silence told her everything. They reached a junction where the corridor split 3 ways. Gunfire erupted from the left. A body slid into view, unmoving. Amara's breath caught. Go right, Min Jae said, already turning left. No. Amara snapped, grabbing his arm. We stay together. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. And for the first time, the mask slipped. This ends tonight, he said quietly. One way or another. Before she could argue, a group of armed men appeared at the far end of the corridor, Tae-suk's men. Their movements were confident, familiar with the terrain. Min Jae shoved Amara behind him and raised his weapon. Run, he ordered. I won't leave you, she said. He smiled faintly. You already saved one life tonight. Let me repay the favor. The firefight was brutal and fast. Min Jae moved like a shadow given form, precise and relentless, buying her time inch by inch. Amara backed away, heart tearing itself apart as she watched him take a hit, then another. Min Jae, she screamed. He staggered, still firing, still standing. Go, he shouted. A shot rang out, closer than before. Min Jae stiffened, the force driving him to one knee. His weapon clattered to the floor. Amara ran back to him instinctively, dropping beside him. Don't, he breathed. Listen to me. Blood soaked into his suit, dark and spreading. You don't belong to this world, he said. Don't let it bury you. Tears blurred her vision. I can't leave you. You already have, he said gently. That's the point. More footsteps echoed. Too many. Min Jae reached into his jacket with trembling fingers and pressed something into her palm, a small drive. This, he said, is everything. Tae-suk. His partners. The next move. She shook her head, choking. You're coming with me. He smiled again, softer this time. Protect him, he whispered. Even if he never forgives you. Then he turned his head toward the approaching men, lifted his fallen weapon with his last strength, and fired. The explosion that followed shook the corridor. Amara screamed his name as the force knocked her back, smoke and fire swallowing everything. Hands grabbed her arms before she could move again. Rough. Merciless. She fought, clawed, kicked, but exhaustion and shock betrayed her. A blow to the head sent stars exploding behind her eyes. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Tae-suk's smile emerging through the smoke. Jaehyun felt the betrayal before he saw it. He was moving through the east wing, issuing commands, recalibrating defenses, when the shot came from behind. White-hot pain tore through his side, spinning him into the wall. He slid to the floor, breath tearing out of him in a strangled sound. Tae-suk stepped into view slowly, gun still smoking. You always were predictable, Tae-suk said calmly. Trusting the wrong people. Building something beautiful and thinking it would last. Jaehyun forced himself upright, blood soaking through his shirt. "This ends with you," he said. Tae-suk laughed softly. "No. This ends with you watching everything you love burn. You never wanted the empire," Jae-hyun said through clenched teeth. "You wanted my life. I wanted what you took." Tae-suk snapped, his calm cracking. "The respect, the fear, the loyalty. Father looked at you and saw a king. He looked at me and saw a shadow. He stepped closer, gun raised again. And now," he said, "I erase you." A gunshot rang out, but not from Tae-suk's weapon. He stumbled, gasping, a bullet tearing through his shoulder. Jae-hyun looked up to see Madame Yoon standing in the doorway, her expression ice cold. "You are an embarrassment," she said. Tae-suk staggered back, fury blazing in his eyes. "This isn't over." He fled as guards closed in. Madame Yoon knelt beside Jae-hyun, pressing her hand to his wound. "She's gone," she said quietly. Jae-hyun's eyes widened. "Where is she?" Tae-suk took her. The pain in his side was nothing compared to the hollow that opened in his chest. Amara woke tied to a chair. The room was familiar, the old West Wing ballroom, long abandoned, its chandeliers draped in dust and shadow. Her head throbbed. Her wrists burned against the restraints. Tae-suk circled her slowly, savoring the moment. "You're impressive," he said. "Most people break long before this." "Is that what this is?" Amara asked hoarsely. "An ego exercise?" He chuckled. "You think this is about you? No. You're just convenient. You killed your own people," she said. "Your brother. He's not dead," Tae-suk replied. "Unfortunately." He leaned closer. "But he will live knowing he failed to protect you. That's better." Amara's fingers curled around the drive hidden in her sleeve. "Min-jae's last gift." "You're wrong about one thing," she said calmly. "Oh, you didn't plan for me." Tae-suk raised an eyebrow, amused. She slammed her head back into his face. Chaos erupted. She toppled the chair, rolling hard as gunfire cracked overhead. She scrambled behind a fallen pillar, hands working feverishly at the restraints. Her wrist screamed in pain as she tore free. She ran, not away, but deeper into the room, toward the control panel she had memorized weeks ago. Tae-suk recovered quickly, fury overtaking his composure. "Kill her," he roared. Lights flickered. Doors slammed shut as Amara slammed her palm against the emergency lockdown. "You learned too much," Tae-suk snarled, stalking toward her. "I learned exactly enough," she shot back. She plugged the drive into the terminal. Screens around the room lit up, transactions, names, faces. Evidence cascading like a confession. Tae-suk froze. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I made sure everyone sees who you really are," Amara said. "Including the people you answer to." Sirens wailed anew, this time different. "Official. External." Tae-suk laughed, breathless. "You think this ends me?" He stepped closer, eyes burning. "Men like me don't fall. We evolve." Security burst into the room. Tae-suk raised his hand slowly, smiling at Amara. "This world is bigger than your courage," he said softly. "If you think tonight was the war, you're already dead." They dragged him away, his laughter echoing long after he disappeared. Amara found Jae-hyun at dawn. He lay in the infirmary wing, pale, stitched, alive. When he opened his eyes and saw her, something broke in his expression, relief so raw it hurt to witness. "You should have run," he said weakly. She stepped closer. "You should know by now, I don't." His hand found hers, grip surprisingly strong. "I lost Min-jae," he said. "I know," she whispered. "He saved me." Silence filled the room, heavy with grief and survival. Jae-hyun looked at her, truly looked at her, no masks left. "I don't know how to exist without turning everything I touch into a battlefield," he said. "Then let me help you build something else," Amara replied. Outside, the sun rose over Seoul, casting light over a city that had no idea how close it had come to collapse. And somewhere beyond the horizon, other eyes watched. Waiting. The city of Seoul did not sleep after blood had been spilled. It only changed its rhythm. Dawn crept in slow and pale, slipping between glass towers and steel bridges, washing the scars of the night in soft gold. From the highest floor of the mansion overlooking the Han River, Amara stood barefoot against cold marble, wrapped in a silk robe that still smelled faintly of antiseptic and smoke. The skyline stretched endlessly before her, beautiful, ruthless, alive. Behind her, the mansion breathed again. Not the tense, predatory silence of a battlefield, but the careful quiet of survival. The war inside these walls was over. The consequences were not. Footsteps approached without urgency. That alone told her who it was. Min-jae had always moved like a shadow, silent, alert, prepared for violence. The man walking toward her now moved slower, heavier. Each step measured like a reminder that mortality had touched him and left its mark. Jaehyun stopped a few feet behind her. He wore black, as always, but today the suit concealed bandages beneath silk and linen. His face was paler, a faint bruise shadowing his jaw. The sharpness remained, but something else lived behind his eyes now, something unarmored. "You should be resting," Amara said without turning. He huffed softly. "So should you." She finally looked at him. His gaze traveled her face the way it always did now. Not as possession, not as threat, but as something earned. Something fiercely guarded. "You saved my life," he said. "I refuse to let it be taken," she corrected. A corner of his mouth lifted, then faded. "That's worse." The mansion staff moved differently around them these days. Madame Yoon passed the doorway, paused, and bowed, not to Jaehyun alone, but to Amara as well. It was subtle, deliberate. A message. Amara noticed. She noticed everything now. Power had a scent, a temperature. She could feel it shifting in her direction. Word had spread through the house, like a controlled burn. Tae-suk was alive, but finished, his influence dismantled piece by piece, his allies exposed, his name spoken carefully now, like a curse best not invoked. Min-jae's sacrifice had hardened the loyalty of every man who remained. They no longer followed Jaehyun out of fear alone. They followed him because he had bled. And they watched Amara because she had stood when anyone else would have fallen. Later that morning, she sat at the long black table where decisions were made. Not beside Jaehyun. Across from him. Documents lay open, shipping routes, shell companies, numbers layered over maps of ports and borders. Men spoke carefully now, glancing toward her before offering opinions. Not permission, recognition. "This route is compromised," Amara said calmly, tapping the screen. "Not because of enforcement, because loyalty shifted." One of the men frowned. "How would you?" "Because pressure doesn't move like violence," she continued, unbothered. "It moves like silence. When money stops answering calls, that's where the fracture is." Jaehyun watched her say it. Not with surprise. With pride. When the meeting ended, no one questioned her presence. No one questioned her authority. She had crossed the invisible threshold. Later, alone in the library, Madame Yoon poured tea and set it gently beside Amara. "You survived," the older woman said. "So did you." Madame Yoon studied her. "Many enter this house strong. Few leave it unchanged." "I'm not leaving," Amara replied. A pause. "Then be careful what you become," Madame Yoon said quietly, and left her with the steam rising between them. That night, Jaehyun stood beside Amara on the balcony. The city glowed beneath them, unrepentant. "You could walk away," he said suddenly. "I would not stop you." She turned to him slowly. "You're not asking me to stay." "No," he admitted. "I'm asking whether you already have." She stepped closer, rested her palm against his chest where his heart beat, strong, stubborn, alive. "I stayed the moment I chose not to be afraid of you," she said. "Now I'm choosing what comes next." His hand covered hers. Warm. Steady. "Power and love don't coexist cleanly," he warned. "They poison each other. They sharpen each other," she countered. "If you let them." For a long moment, the city listened. Inside, alarms were silent. Outside, Seoul moved on. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from a rooftop 3 blocks away, binoculars glinting briefly in the moonlight before disappearing into shadow. A phone vibrated. "Yes," the voice said softly. "She's stronger than expected." The call ended. Back in the mansion, Amara leaned against the glass and exhaled slowly. "The game isn't over," she said, eyes fixed on the horizon. Jaehyun followed her gaze. "This is just the beginning."